Welcome to Milan Recording Studios. My name is James Pavel Chakras, and in today's video I have a pair of digital pianos that have been much requested, and this type of video has been asked for a very long time, ever since this keyboard down at the bottom was released. And that digital piano is the Kawai ES920. The ES920 is Kawai's very new successor to the much-loved ES8, which is, at this point, I believe at least 5 years old or somewhere around that time, which is pretty old in the world of modern digital pianos. Typically, models don't stay around for that long, but the ES8 was so good when it came out, the Kawai just simply didn't really feel the need to update it, and frankly, I still think the ES8 is very, very competitive on most aspects, especially the sound, compared to today's market. So I think the ES920 is going to have a very tough job overriding and being better than the ES8. But in today's video, what we're going to be checking out is seeing if the ES920 is in fact actually better than the Kawai ES8. It was about a year ago when I first started hearing people asking for a new ES9. That's what people hypothetically called the theoretical successor of the ES8. They always called it the ES9, and that's what you'd think they would call it, but Kawai instead opted for the longer name of the Kawai ES920. I might just start referring to this instrument as the ES9 though in today's video, just for brevity's sake. So what is the difference between the ES8 and the ES9? Well, there's a few build quality differences that I wanted to talk about first, and that's honestly visually really only the difference. Personally, I think the ES8 looks cooler than the ES9. The ES8 is a little bit slimmer in my opinion, at least from this angle here. It's got a very nice, sleek look to it with the slightly arched top and these nice smooth sides here, and this one here is a kind of a straight flat slab of a piano. Neither of them I don't think look bad, but I think the ES8 in my opinion looks a little bit better from a visual aspect. Build quality wise, I wanted to talk about a few things because this is something that has been not hotly debated but much discussed in my recent video of the ES9 by itself. So basically the ES9 has had, in my opinion, a build quality downgrade from the ES8. The ES8 is made almost entirely of solid metal. This front part here that I'm going to refer to as a key slip, because that's what it would be called on a real piano, this is made of solid metal. Very, very nice. This top plate here with the buttons on it, the buttons themselves are plastic. You can see the light shining through them. But the actual metal bit itself here, well, as I said, it's solid metal. The speaker grill is also metal, but of course it's pretty thin. The back panel here is solid metal. These sides here, I have been told, are wood. They may be plastic, but either way, they're solid and very, very dense and very high quality. And the underside panel here, I can't really tap on it very well, but that is, in fact, solid plastic. So the Kawai ES8 is built like a tank. And the only downside to this is that many people think it's too heavy. It weighs in at about 49 pounds, and that is pretty heavy. But in my opinion, I think I would rather have a well-built digital piano than a moderately built one that's lighter. That's just my personal opinion, because when you're using a digital piano or really any instrument on the road and traveling and gigging with it, a lot of time gigging instruments are heavily abused. Even the cases for them will often get beat up. So in my opinion, it's better to have a much durable but heavier instrument than a lighter but flimsier made instrument. Now, that's not to say that the ES9 is made flimsily. It does have an acceptable build quality for this price point, but in my opinion, the ES9 has lost its premium feel that the ES8 once had. This key slip here is hollow plastic, and in fact, it can even flex so much that it can touch the front of the keys. This top panel here is now plastic. The speaker grills are still metal. The back panel, I can't reach it, but it is plastic. The sides are just one and the same with the top panel, so hollow plastic. And even the underside, which is almost always on digital pianos, either a solid slab of like MDF, processed wood, or plastic in the case of this one. In this case, it is plastic, but it's hollow plastic, just a shell. So the ES9, in my opinion, has a much lower build quality, which I don't like as much compared to the build quality of the ES8. But the upside to that is that this instrument is 11 pounds lighter than the ES8. 11 pounds isn't as much as I would have thought for the amount of metal and solid wood or plastic that went into this ES8. But there is a weight reduction in the ES9, so I guess for some that is a benefit. Even some of the buttons, I think, are a little bit of a downgrade. I think the volume slider is an upgrade. It feels nicer than the one up here on the ES8, but the power switch on the ES9 has a cheaper sound to it than the ES8. Here's one on the ES8. Here's one on the ES9. No, does it matter what the power button sounds like? No, not at all, but it's just something I noticed. Something else that I think has received a bit of a downgrade is the music rest. Now, this is the music rest for the old ES8, and it's one of my favorites in the digital piano industry. It's made of solid metal, and you can throw this thing down the flight of stairs onto concrete, and it would get scratched up, but it probably wouldn't get bent out of shape, and you could put it back on the piano, and it would be perfectly fine. Now, that's not a scenario that would regularly happen to a music desk, but I'm just saying it's built like a tank. You simply just drop it in here, and there you have it. I'm not going to leave that there for the rest of the video, but that's what it looks like. The music rest for the ES9, however, is this. It's very, very reminiscent of the music desk that comes with the Yamaha P515. By the way, I have a comparison between the ES9 and the P515, so go check that out. And basically, this here is the all-plastic music rest for the ES9. I don't think it looks bad, and I think it may have fixed the one flaw that this music desk had, where this front lip is a little bit too big and it makes turning pages a bit annoying. This, I think, has fixed that, but the build quality of it isn't as high as the old music desk. So the final thing that I wanted to talk about with these two is the damper pedals themselves, the pedal units they come with. And the reason for that is because that hasn't changed one bit, and I'm really happy about that. Let me grab the damper pedals for you. Normally when I do a comparison between two digital pianos, I grab two different pedals, but they both use the exact same one, and this one has some dust on it. This is the Kawai F10H damper pedal, and it's one of my favorites, if not perhaps my favorite, certainly within this price class in the digital piano industry. One of my followers reminded me that it actually has half pedaling, which is a very nice feature that I just kind of ignored in my ES9 review, standalone review, and the video I did of the P515. So it's got half pedaling, but more importantly to me than that, it has a really great build quality. You've got a solid metal underside, you've got a nice durable plastic top, you've got a solid metal pedal that has a really nice feel to it that's pretty reminiscent of what a real piano's pedal feels like, and all around it feels really, really great. It sticks to the floor excellently on almost every surface I've tried it on, from smooth concrete to this carpet I've got it on right now, and it works just fantastically. So I'm glad that this hasn't been changed or cheapened from the ES8 to the ES9. Good job, Kawai. Go. Thank you. With all the little bits out of the way, I think now it is time to talk about the playing experience of these two instruments and talk about what that is like. So what I'm going to do here is play the default sound of both of these instruments, the SK Concert Grand, and it's a really, really beautiful sound. Before I wanted to do that, though, there is a small little quirk I wanted to just mention here. One benefit of the ES9 is that the screen, which you probably can't see too well, but believe me, the new screen is better. I believe it's an OLED display. It's got a really dark black and a really nice, easily visible white font. You can see it from every angle, and it's an excellent screen. The older style screen on the ES8 would have been great for the time it came out in, but it didn't age amazingly well. It looks pretty primitive to today's standards. However, what's kind of funny is that the SK Concert Grand, in fact, actually on both of them, the concert and grand words are smushed together, although in both there's totally room to have a space between the word concert and grand. I can even see in this top screen there's an extra square that could hold a character, but yet it doesn't, which is kind of interesting, and it's the same thing down here. There's totally extra space on the right of concert grand for there to be a space between the words concert and grand. Just kind of odd. Anyway, let's hear what the SK Concert Grand sounds like on both of these instruments. I'm going to play some Beethoven, some of my original music, and just play some notes and listen to how beautiful they both are. So that is the default sound of the Kawai ES9 and the Kawai ES8. And as you can see, they sound basically the same. Now, although the build quality of the ES9 has been downgraded from the ES8, the playing experience, I think, has been upgraded very, very subtly. One thing that's not so subtle is the sound of the speakers, especially with the acoustic piano sounds in particular on the ES9. They sound really, really much more fat, warm, and present than on the ES8. They sounded very thin and, I don't want to say dull, but they sound very distant on the ES8, and that was one of my original complaints I had with the ES8 when compared to things even, did I do a comparison of this versus the Korg SV2? I don't remember, but definitely compared to the P515 from Yamaha, the speakers in this paled in comparison to the loud, very powerful speakers in the P515. So the Kawai ES920 here has much louder speakers that have a lot more presence to them, and for acoustic piano stuff, they're really, really great. You could even see me try to turn up the volume on the ES8 for that Beethoven piece, which is what threw me off there, because I thought the volume wasn't all the way up. I did mess with the volume sliders earlier in the video, so I thought, oh, maybe I didn't put that up all the way, but it was up all the way, and audibly it was a bit quieter. This range definitely seems to have more presence to it that was more comparable to this, but as a whole, with the acoustic piano sounds, the ES920 sounds and plays better. Now, another thing people would like to know about, I'm absolutely sure, is the action, because I've heard that Kawai has made some little tweaks to the RH3, which is the action they have in this instrument. So the ES8 used the RH3, and this now uses the RH3 as well. And so what are the changes that Kawai made? Well, the changes, I think, are extremely, extremely subtle, and almost nobody would notice them. I even have a hard time noticing the difference. The ES920 feels a little bit heavier in a sense. The ES8 feels springy when you play it. It feels like the keys are slightly actively pushing your fingers back up. And although that is still there in the ES920, it's a bit less than on the ES8. And I think as a whole, the action feels a little bit more smooth and responsive than on the ES8. But again, this is very, very subtle and may even be pretty subjective. I'm not really sure. The ES8, I think, still feels pretty good. It's not 100% perfect, and when I first reviewed the ES8, I mentioned that the let-off, I will turn the volume down now so I can push keys without making noise, the let-off on the ES8, the little bump you feel towards the bottom of the key, is a little bit too subtle, I felt, and that would basically, you know, create some strangeness when you were playing. It actually does feel a little bit more subtle, perhaps, on the ES9. Maybe not. That one's kind of subtle. I mean, jumpy. This one's pretty subtle. That one's actually quite subtle. So I think that's just a little bit of variance in the production rather than actually being changed. Yeah, these all feel pretty jumpy. So I'm not sure that the let-off even has been changed on the ES9. I'm under the impression that it feels a little different, or perhaps it could just be a little bit more used to the feel of the RH3 action, and I don't mind it as much. The fault I had before with it was that it felt really gummy when you're playing pianissimo as quiet as you possibly can, and I don't really feel that as much anymore. So either I've broken these actions in, or perhaps I'm just more used to the feel of the RH3 action. The only real flaw that I would say this action has would be the noise that it makes. You certainly didn't hear it in my performance, but I sort of could. It's less of a problem with this in a sense than with the ES8, because the ES8 speakers were quieter than the ES920. So the ES920 speakers override this sound. And if you're practicing with headphones, you won't hear the sound, but the people in your house will hear this when you're practicing with headphones on. And I'll play it on both, so you can hear the difference. Now you've got the clicking of my fingernails. I'm not complaining about that. You've also got the noise that the keys make when they hit the key bed. I'm not complaining about that either. It's actually a bit respectable on both. It's a bit louder on the ES9, actually. It's very nice and quiet on the ES8. But it's more thumpy on the ES9, probably because of that plastic case. But what hasn't really changed on the ES8 versus ES9 is the noise that the keys make when they come back up. This is a flaw that I'm not the only one who's mentioned it and talked to people about. They bounce when they come back up. It's very rattly and high-pitched on the ES8, whereas on the ES9, it's deeper and more kind of thumpy again. But either way, that flaw is still there. Is this a massive flaw? Is it a deal killer in the action? Am I saying you shouldn't buy the ES920 because the keys bounce? No. All I'm saying is just that it's there, and it's not quite normal, in my opinion. I don't think the keys should really do that. But it doesn't really affect the playing all that much. The other thing I've noticed that's a difference between the two is that the ES8 doesn't seem to do trills and really quick movements as well as the ES9. That might be because it's at an angle. I'm willing to put that out there. But that could be one of the improvements that Kawai has made to the RH3 action, make it a little bit more responsive. I've always found that the RH3 action, although it is quite responsive, isn't quite as good as playing fast staccato passages as other instruments in the price bracket are, and that could be one of the things that they have slightly improved on the ES9 compared to the ES8, because the ES8 didn't do trills as easily. Oh yeah, that's way easier. I know you can't hear what I'm doing, but you can hear the keys making noise. And it's a bit easier on the ES9. Anyway, let's hear some noise now. Let's hear some music, actually. And let's turn on these instruments once again and go back to playing some piano. What I'm going to do is run through... Honestly, I can just run through the sounds of one, because the sounds, all the piano sounds on the ES9 are exactly the same as on the ES8. And in fact, I think we'll find that's true for almost the entire instrument. There's maybe one or two additional sounds here or there in the electric piano category and the organ. Everything else, from what I can tell, is exactly the same sound-wise between the ES9 and the ES8. I've heard that there are the samples are longer in some of the sounds, probably that default SK Concert Grand. So I've been told that the sounds have been upgraded a bit from the ES9 to the ES8, but listening to it through the speakers, they both sound good. I really can't tell the major differences between the sounds. I'm going to run through and just play all the different piano sounds. I hope you like it. What I will say is that playing the, not the SK, I'm looking at the name on the screen and I keep wanting to say SK whatever it says on the screen, SK5, SKEX. The ES9, the playing experience, especially with the piano tones, is definitely an upgrade over the ES8. I'm not sure if it's because the samples and the speakers are better in the ES9 or just that the speakers are better, but either way, the ES9 sounds better when you're playing it than the ES8, especially with some of those secondary sounds like Pop Grand 2, I thought sounded better, a lot better on the ES9 than the ES8, but you guys listening to the direct line signal might think I'm crazy for saying that because perhaps to you it sounds the same. But all I'm saying is that the speakers of the ES9 are definitely, in some cases, an upgrade over the ES8. However, at the same time, it's almost like Kawai went one step forward and then at the same time a step backwards. I can't say one step forward is two step back because they are an upgrade. But the one issue with these speakers in the ES920 is that with certain sounds like the electric piano, with the organs, you'll get these really crazy vibrations that almost shake the whole instrument. That's not limited to the ES920, other instruments do it too. But that is a thing with the ES9 that isn't really a thing hardly at all with the ES8. Those same chords, the same notes, with the same organ sounds on the ES9 that drive it crazy don't do anything to the ES8. But at the same time, the ES8's not as loud. So it's kind of like a give or take situation. Louder speakers, bit more distortion. Quiet speakers, but very clean, no distorted tones. I think now it's time to move on to the electric piano category. Let's do that here really quickly. But before I do that, actually, let's get sidetracked once more and talk about some of the menu features. Both of these have the same basic menu and the same basic layout. The volume is on opposite sides of the two, but this here is your sound category, essentially. You've got your transpose and split functions on both. This here is your registration button on both. And then the rest of these are the your sounds. You can click them and just click the button over and over again to choose the sound you want. And it's the same thing down here. I like how there's a separation between the registration button and the rest of the buttons up here, whereas there isn't down here. So that's a little bit odd. I like that layout up here. I also just like these buttons a little bit more. They're kind of round and cute, and these ones are, I don't know, big and, I don't know, they're not ugly, but kind of cheap looking. These ones are really cool. Also, you can see that there's a different color. You got blue lights down here instead of red up here, so that's kind of neat. What else is here? You've got effects and reverb. Your menu buttons on the ES8 are kind of weird. You've got your menu buttons over here. You've got your value buttons over here, which is a little bit weird, and your exit buttons over here. I like the layout of the menu better on the ES9. You can't really see it. It's under here. But you've got your menu and value buttons next to each other, and your exit button is just right here. So all your menu stuff is in one spot, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Also, the screen's bigger, and it just, the navigation seems more logical on the ES9 than it was on the ES8. You've got all the same stuff in that menu, though. I can scroll through here. You've got basic settings. You've got virtual technician, which is really cool. You can go in here on both of these and tweak all kinds of different values of the acoustic pianos. For example, I can come in here and change the touch curve, the voicing, the damper resonance, damper noise, string resonance, key off effect, fallback noise, hammer delay, top board, the amount the top board is open, the decay time, minimum touch, equal temperament, or you can change the temperament, stretch tuning, dot curve, I don't know what that is, some kind of curve, user key volume, half pedal adjust, soft pedal depression, and then back onto touch curve. So you've got a massive amount of things you can tweak with the acoustic piano sounds, and all of that, I'm pretty sure, is exactly the same down here. I took a quick look, and it all seems to be the same on the ES9. That's one of my favorite features of these. Honestly, I'm really happy with the internal piano sounds, so I don't really talk about them much, or adjust them much, but I'm really happy with the internal acoustic piano sounds. There's other things in the menu here as well, besides virtual technician. You've got key settings, rhythm settings, MIDI settings, power settings, and then that's what is all on the ES8. The ES9 has an additional menu setting for Bluetooth because you can actually use this as a Bluetooth speaker. So you can have a $1,500 Bluetooth speaker, and it actually sounds quite nice to run, you know, the radio through, whatever. So that's pretty cool. So you've got 7 menu screens in the ES9 versus 6 in the ES8. Finally, over here, you've got your effects and reverb settings, and you hold both of them together to turn on and off the amp simulator. This down here has a separate button for the amp sim, which is pretty nice. You've also got the effects and reverb right here. You've got a little recorder, which is pretty handy, as well as a rhythm section that uses the same buttons, which is pretty cool, and that's also available down here. You've also got metronome and USB functionalities. You push both of those together to get a panel lock. That's the same down here. And then on this, your volume and your power over here. So all the buttons are exactly the same. There's almost no additional features. You got some Bluetooth, and I've been told there's a couple of extra piano technician functions and a couple of other things. But the big thing that's new in the ES920 is the Bluetooth. Maybe that's why the blue lights. So that's, the ES920 shares a lot in common sonically and you know, physically, as far as the menu and all that is concerned, with its original ES8. Now I think it's finally time to get on to testing some of these electric piano sounds. Let's run through all of them. There's more in the ES9. So those are all the electric piano sounds of the ES8 and the ES9. There's more on the ES9, like I said, and they're actually, I think they sound better. That could be because the speakers are making them sound more lively and fat, or it could be that the samples are actually different. I haven't had the chance yet to listen to the direct line signal itself. I'm just going off of what they sound like to me through the speakers, and to me they sound bigger and better on the ES9 than on the ES8. I particularly like the first classic EP down here on the ES9. It's very rich and gritty compared to the rather thin sounding, but still good one on the ES8. So Kawai's definitely made some changes here, I think. And they sound good. Now, you can also run these through all sorts of different effects. Both of these have the same amount of effects. I think this one might have a different one. You've got all kinds of effects. You've got choruses, tremolo, classic tremolo, tremolo plus chorus, auto pan, classic pan, phaser plus pan, phaser, phaser and chorus, rotary, stereo delay, ping delay, triple delay, and then chorus again, which I think is where we started off with. And this has a couple of others. You got an ensemble effect, and you've also got a couple of different Leslie rotary style speakers. But other than that, you've got the same type of effects menu, so you can run these through all sorts of different effects and change the sound if you please. I personally like the way they sound by default, so I don't really ever have the need to use the effects or the amp sims or the EQ that this has. It has a built-in 4-band EQ. I never really have the need to do any of that with the ES920 because I like how the sounds sound. So that's really good. Up next, we have the organ category of both of these. There's one additional organ sound in the ES920. It's my personal favorite in the whole ES920, and yet at the same time, for some reason, it's a whole bunch quieter than the others. One of my followers said that's because it's simulating a Hammond organ sound with less drawbars pulled out, which makes a lot of sense. It definitely sounds that way, but I don't know why they couldn't just boost it up just a little bit more. The reason I think, though, that they didn't is because that particular sound especially, but all of the organ sounds, the tone wheel organs anyway, create a lot of vibration in the speakers and a lot of extraneous buzzing that isn't supposed to be there. So I think if they boosted that third organ sound, the ballad organ, up more, it would really wreak havoc with the speakers. It already does, and if it was louder, it would just keep getting worse. Regardless, though, the organ tones themselves are actually pretty good. They're not my favorite of all digital pianos, and I think they're one of the weakest categories of the ES9 and the ES8 as well, but to me they sound better coming out of the ES8 speakers than out of the ES9, which is rather interesting. So let's check out how these sound. So I think the reason they sound a bit more subdued on the ES9 than the ES8 might be because, like I said, if that ballad organ was turned up more, it would wreak havoc on the speakers, and that would hold true with all of the organs, and that's not an issue at all with anything on the ES8. Nothing on the ES8 can manage to make the speakers distort. So in a sense, like I said, Kawai kind of went a little bit forward, but also a little bit backward with the speakers on the ES9. They're louder, and for most things sound better, but for organs and for some of the EPs, although they sound better in the EPs, the organs especially sound a lot more subdued and still wreak havoc with the speakers. There's all kinds of crazy buzzing distortion noises with the ES9 that simply aren't there on the ES8. But yet, at the same time, for everything else, the ES8 sounds pretty quiet compared to the ES9. So it's a bit of a give and take situation there. Up next is a fun little category called harpsichords and mallets, and the name is pretty self-explanatory. You've got a harpsichord, a clavinet, and then two different mallet-type instruments, and I'll briefly play all of those. So all of those sound about the same, but I think the harpsichord has been improved on the ES9 of all things. Next up is strings and choir, and there's a bit more of them on the ES9 than on the ES8, and I'm just going to quickly run through all of these as well. They're not the main focal point of the instrument. I think everything after the electric piano sound and excluding the basses, I think it's a little bit clear. So that would be the organ category, the harpsichord and mallets category, and the strings and choir category. It's a little bit clear that this isn't really Kawai's main focus point, because although the sounds in here are good on both instruments, they're not as good as the acoustic and electric pianos, which is the main focus of these instruments. So those are all the string sounds of the Kawai ES8 versus the Kawai ES9. So you've got a little bit more of a selection as well. And one of those synth pads, the square pad, I think is what it was called. Let me see here. Square pad, yeah, exactly. That's actually borrowed from the MP11 SE. That's a sound that was used on there. Also maybe the MP7 SE. So that's one of my favorite synth sounds from the MP11 SE. I liked that one back when I owned an MP11. So it's kind of cool to see that making its way down into lesser expensive instruments. On the MP11, you had a modulation wheel, so you could actually change the cutoff and filter modulation. You could change all kinds of stuff on the MP11. Of course, none of those are here on the ES9. Finally, we have the bass sound, so I'm going to quickly run through them. They're basically the same, the same on both of these two. You've got a couple of extra electric basses on the ES9, but other than that, it's basically the same thing. So, here we go. So that is all of the sounds of the ES8 and the ES920. So you've got quite a few different sounds to play with, and honestly, in my opinion, almost all of them are really good. The only ones that say that are bad would be, honestly, probably that last organ sound, that last church organ. I'll remind you what that sounds like here. That's clearly an old sound that's been reused and reused for many years, but also church organ's not the main focus of these. So in one sense, it really doesn't matter especially because the acoustic pianos and the electric pianos on both of these are really, really great. I've always loved the sound of these premier Kawai acoustics and even their digital counterparts, which is what you'll find in these. And I've always thought they sounded really, really good and were always a pleasure to play on. And although certain things about the ES9 have, in my opinion, decreased in quality, the sound quality has not decreased, and if anything, it has definitely increased in the ES9. The playing experience of the ES9, frankly, is wonderful, and I think it has also been increased over the ES8. It was nice to play the ES8, but I think it's better to play the ES9. So that, I think, is really, really good. So basically, that is pretty much everything about these two. There's a few other features that I personally don't use all that much, which is why I tend to gloss over them. For example, the registration functions. You can create and save your own registrations on both of these instruments by hitting the registration button. Then you can choose registration bank A, B, C, or D, and it works the same on both. You hit registration, you hit banks 1, A, B, C, or D, and it works the same on all of them. So there's actually a bunch of pre-created hidden sounds in this registration bank. I'm not going to go through them because they're all the same, I think, as everything else in here, except just with different effects than what you would find in the main easily accessible sounds. There might be a couple of additional ones, but I'm not really going to go through those in today's video. You've also got the recorder over here, which is pretty handy, and I do use these recorders from time to time. You've also got an accompaniment mode as well, and it hasn't changed at all since the ES8. If I go to the accompaniment mode of both and I hit play at the same time on the same beat, which I think we're using the same, yeah, Funk Shuffle 1, same tempo. If I hit play together, we've got the same chord up, you'll hear they sound the same. I think there might be some chord voicing differences between the two, but the rhythm and the basic idea is pretty much exactly the same. So there's that, which is pretty cool. You've also got the recorder and you got some an A/B function as well on both of them, which doesn't work perfectly. It's synced to the metronome of the recording, because when you make a recording, you can have it be synced to a metronome, and the A/B function will be synced to that metronome. So even if you have the metronome off, the A/B function will be tied to that metronome. So not 100% perfect, but you can get around it. Then you've got the built-in metronome, like I just said. Again, it's a metronome, which is pretty sweet. You've got some USB functionality on both of them. And you know, one reason I say that the the ES920 is drawing inspiration from Yamaha isn't only just because of this music desk that looks just like the one on the P515. The USB slot is like right in here, just like Yamaha does on so many of their products, whereas on the old ES8, it's over here in the corner up on its own little ledge, and I think that's relatively unique. I don't see that too often, but I usually do see the little dip for the USB stick. And that's just about everything that is different between the ES8 and the ES9. So you might be wondering to yourself, well, which one to buy? Which one is better? And honestly, I love the build quality of the ES8. I really do. I think the ES9 has really lost that premium feel. Sometimes I like to watch videos about smartphones to see what's new on the market, and a lot of the time people talk about premium feel. When they pick up a phone, does it feel premium? And premium materials are metal and glass in the smartphone world, and they give a phone a premium feel. They make it feel heavy and quality in the hands. And that's the same with digital pianos as well. And although the key word there is heavy, and the reason people dislike this instrument, and the reason more than likely Kawai switched to hollow plastic is because hollow plastic is lighter than dense metal. But personally, this solid metal construction, or almost solid metal, it's solid enough to me, this type of construction gives this instrument a premium feel, and it made it feel more exotic and more quality than anything else in this price point. The P515 was built very well, but this has a higher build quality, and as such, when you look at it and when you play it, it kind of feels like a higher end piano. And this just feels like a digital piano. It feels a lot more generic to me than the old ES8. The old ES8, although the action wasn't quite perfect to my liking, it was something special. It was really, really special to me. That build quality was unlike anything I've ever seen from any other company ever, and this is just like every build quality by every other company ever, with the hollow plastic. I've never actually seen this. The hollow plastic underside, not an instrument of this price caliber. However, having said that, the ES9 is lighter than the ES8, which is very important for a lot of people, and the playing experience definitely has been upgraded from the ES8 to the ES9. It's subtle, and a lot of people probably wouldn't even tell. They'd sit down on this and go, oh, this is really great. I don't think if most people would sit down at an ES9 and go, oh, wow, this is so much better than the ES8. But the playing experience is really, really lovely on the ES9 and the ES920, if you want to call it that. I've just been calling it the ES9 because it's cool. So that is my video of the ES8 versus the ES920. I really hope that you guys have enjoyed it, and honestly, that's pretty much the conclusion. So there is really, in a sense, there is no conclusion, because they're both very, very close. And there's things I like about the ES8 that aren't present in the ES9, and there's things I like on the ES9 that aren't present in the ES8. So I feel like one big area of competition Kawai might have for selling the new ES920 is not only new instruments in this price class, but also themselves. Used ES8s are going to be a really great buy for anyone who's looking for a good digital piano. The value will probably stay relatively close to the new value, maybe $500 less or so than what they went for new. But they should hold their value relatively well for the time being. I assume, I imagine they will, and I think they'll last a long time. They're very durable, very well made, and so if someone's looking for a nice digital piano to buy, and they're looking for around the $1,000, $1,200 price point bracket, ES8s on the used market, if in good condition, like most of them are, would be a very good option. So I think that's one thing that Kawai would have to worry about with the ES8. The ES9. I don't think they've changed enough of the ES9 to make it truly unique and something truly special over the ES8. It is better, but is it that much better? If you had an ES8, is it worth it to buy a new ES920? Not sure. I'm honestly not sure. For me, see, the difference between the ES8 and the ES920 is not as stark of a difference as, say, the old MP11 to the new MP11 SE was. The new MP11 SE had the same action and the same good build quality and most of the same features, but it came with the whole set list of sounds we're seeing here and here. Really, really great sound samples that most of those weren't available in the old MP11. That SK concert ground sound is amazing. That wasn't there in the old MP11. So a lot of people, including myself, I didn't buy an MP11 SE, but I really wanted to try one out because of those new sound samples. So in my opinion, there's not really enough difference between the ES8 and the ES920 to really validate buying an ES920 if you already have an ES8. However, if you don't have a digital piano already, or you have a relatively inexpensive digital piano, like perhaps even a Kawai ES110, and you're looking to upgrade, the Kawai ES920 is definitely a way that you can go, and honestly, you really can't go wrong with it. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm finally done with it now. And with all of that, I'll see you in the next video. I've got lots of cool videos of digital pianos, especially the ES920, other comparisons, all that stuff. It's going to be really cool. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.